Good morning. I'm Ashley Rooney from Lexington Remembers World War II. And today I have a sailor from the North Atlantic, a World War II vet, Joe Campbell. Some of you may remember The Cruel Sea by Nicholas Montserrat. I remember being absolutely entranced by that book. And Joe sailed those same waters. And so he's here to tell us about it. So Joe, how did it all begin? Were you enlisted or did you get drafted?
I was 17 years old, just turned 17, and I went down to the recruiting office, and because my cousin was in the regular Navy, I signed up in the regular Navy also in 1943. And I went into the recruiting office, and off we went to, we sat there for hours waiting to go to basic training. And probably there were 100 of us in this room. Anyhow, what happened was they were looking for volunteers to go on an errand, a pair of people. So of the 100, they started to call off the names of these people. They had all our names. And I had said to my buddy, Sandy Corbett, his father owned a drugstore in Waverly Square. And the two of us, I said, we've been sitting here. Why don't we volunteer for this errand that they want to do? Yeah. So with that, when they called off the names for everybody to go to Newport in this draft, 80 or 100 of them, Sandy and I sat there along with 6 other chaps. And we were sent to Sampson, which was a Sampson training base, which is on Seneca Lake in New York State. Mm-hmm. Where I was out there guarding the clotheslines in November with no clothes on them, of course, and in the tropical waters of northern New York State. Yes. And one of my problems was when I went into the Navy, I was 5'13", and I weighed a blistering 134 pounds. Mm. They could hold a lamp bulb in my back for a chest X-ray, 40 watt or so, and see right through me. I was that skinny. And my problem came, of course, now when we were to put on uniforms. I was, as I say, 6'1" and a 29-inch waist. So in order to, the 29-inch waist on the 13-button Navy pants came just above my knee, lower than my knee. So I either, anyhow, I got dressed and we froze up there. And from there I went to, I had an operation for a hernia. And in those days, they kept us in bed for 2 days, for two weeks. You stayed in bed. Wow. And you stayed in the hospital for seven weeks. Then I went off to quartermaster school in Maryland. From there, my first ship was a 1918 destroyer from World War I, which was very old and yeah. Old steam-driven thing. And of course, when you're aboard her, you're the the new kid on the block. So they had me on the bunks were 3 tiers high,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on the aft end of the ship with a steam pipe running just above my head when I was in the bunks,
Oh.
uh, with 700 degree steam running through there, I think.
Oh.
One of my first adventures, I, as I say, I was low man on the totem pole, a second class
Seaman.
ranking. And when I was on the bridge at night, you get obviously you get the 12 to 4 shift because new kid on the block. But they had showed me where everything was up there. And all of a sudden I looked over and we were in the Atlantic somewhere heading south. We were escorting, there were 3 of these destroyers, old tanks, and the CVEs, which are the short converted aircraft carriers. And I was on watch, as I say, on a midnight, on a moonlit night, beautiful night. And we were in where there was phosphorescent water. You could see all the sparkles. I don't know whether you've ever had this experience or not, but it's really something. The water glistens and shines. And I looked over the side and I saw these 2 torpedoes heading for our ship. Oh, I said, oh my God. And I'm racing around the deck looking for the emergency alarm that would be all hands on deck. And I couldn't find the darn thing. So now I'm looking for a life jacket. And the next thing, these torpedoes made a right-hand turn and proceeded to escort the vessel. They were dolphins, which fortunately, as I say, I never did find the alarm.
Yes.
And from there, I was hauled off that ship and I went to the Naval Academy prep school briefly. And I was there for about 3 months, and they had given me a psychoplegic eye examination. And there were 2 of us called up to the office after we'd been there maybe 3 months or so. And they said, you've got a bad eye there. You can't go to the academy. In those days, you could not go on to the Naval Academy if you wore glasses. And they said, someday, you don't wear glasses now, but someday you will need them. And so the 2, there was another chap from Medford with me, and they bounced us out of the school because of my eyes.
How did you feel? Were you deeply distressed or happy to get out of the school?
No, I was disappointed in it because I thought it would be a great spot to go to the academy and move up through from second class. And the next thing, I was sent from there down to Key West, Florida. And in Key West, I boarded a 110-foot submarine chaser that we were out looking for the subs. Initially, the ship was making the run to Havana to escort or to sound out submarines in Florida. But by then, the war was moving along smartly as far as we were concerned. Finally, and all the subs were up in the north, in the Atlantic. So they transferred us, and we worked our way slowly up the coast. And we were in Portland, Maine on VE Day, when they announced the fact that the Germans had surrendered.
Yeah.
They sent us out to escort this submarine. Now, we had on this submarine chaser, we had a 40 millimeter gun on the bow and 2 machine guns, and then we had depth charges on the stern. And in any kind of a sea, this ship would pitch and toss like nothing. With that 40 millimeter, we could either hit a seagull or maybe hit a whale that was sounding, or down deep, but anything in between was safe, because the way the pitch of the ship up and down was, by the time they could set that gun to fire, we were in it had a new elevation or side movement. Anyhow, as I say, they sent us out to escort this German submarine back on into Portland. So we steamed out, and we were out about 30 miles, I would say. And we had instructions to escort him back on into the harbor. And over the horizon came this German sub, who was 325 foot long, give or take, with a 5-inch gun on the bow and a 3-inch gun on the stern. And he could do 23 knots. Now, we had a maximum speed of 15 knots. So I signaled over to him to, we are your escort, please slow down. And I mean, in German, it didn't make any difference to him. All he knew was he was headed for a hot shower in Portland, and he had kept his 23 knots up. And he had tied the ship up and had probably had a shower and turned the keys over, and we were still pumping our way back into Portland. And
Now, was he surrendering then?
he surrendered. Oh yeah, before the war was over. And
The war was over. So what
Yeah.
happened to them? How did they get back home? Would they stay here? And
the amazing part of it is I have written to and called into Portland when VE Day came for 75 years, etc. And I called the Portland Press Herald and told them of our incident 75 years ago. And there was no follow-up on it. They didn't seem to care at all. Amazing.
well, Lexington cares. But you always wonder what happened to those Germans. I mean, you said they came and got a nice hot shower, but then did they end up in a
Well, where was I? I was in a naval station down in Carolina, where they had German prisoners from the African Corps. They were a tough bunch of guys, but I never knew what happened to that crew after that. They took us, this ship, we took off and went to Newfoundland. We were in Gentian, Newfoundland. In fact, we were there the day the sun came out. I can't remember what day that was, but the rest of the time in Newfoundland, um, it was fog
Yeah.
and cold.
And cold. I have a friend who lives up there. Yes.
Unbelievable. And in those days, Newfoundland was part of the English, it was an English colony, but not part of Canada. And Canada was forced to absorb Newfoundland and Labrador um, after the war sometime.
Oh.
And those poor Newfoundlanders, we had broken a shaft on the ship and had to be towed over to St. John, and it was the saddest and most rundown village I've ever seen. It was just horrible there.
Mm.
However, they fixed the ship, and our next stop was Reykjavik, Iceland. It was amazing as we pulled into the harbor then in Reykjavik. There was half of a British destroyer sitting on the beach just outside the harbor. And we thought it had been torpedoed, and not so. What had happened was this ship had broken up in a storm up there and just drifted in onto the beach. Right.
Oh, wow.
Right. When they did take pictures of us on occasion, and they would, for example, we could not make it all the way from Newfoundland to Iceland with the fuel on board. So we had to take fuel from a Coast Guard cutter. And I believe at that point in time, we were part of a Coast Guard element.
So why did they send you to Iceland? This was after the war. It was after VE.
The war. I never knew. We got up to Iceland. It was like a vacation trip. The only thing we did up there was of service to the country. We did take a trip down to Vestmannaeyja, and if you recall, about maybe 3 or 5 years or so ago, they had a volcano in Vestmannaeyja, and it wiped out the whole city.
Yeah.
Which is that small island on the south coast, just south of Iceland, on the south coast, I should say. And the only thing we did there was to take radios and materials that the government had established in Reykjavik, and we took a crew out to sea, and they threw all the radios over the side, got sick, all of them, and then we had to bring this work party back in of soldiers, and that was it.
You don't know why they threw away the radios?
Apparently, the Navy never told me why we were doing all these things, but why they did all that when they were shutting down some of those stations that they had in Iceland, and that was our job. We were junk dealers, I guess.
Huh. Iceland at that point was
Neutral.
separated from Denmark. It
Pardon?
was independent. Iceland was independent.
No, it was. They were one of the oldest independent nations.
You got to. There was the boy from Massachusetts. You got to see all sorts of volcanoes.
Right.
So you really didn't see much action per se.
The only action as I say, we were out there looking for these submarines. No, as a matter of fact, no. the only submarine we saw was the one headed for Portland when the
Yeah.
war was over, thank God.
Wow.
The first ship I was on, that when I was on that four stack, uh, they had a congressional, they had a medal for having sunk a submarine.
Was that destroyer accompanying British freighters back and forth, part of the supply?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, they were out hunting for the subs also,
right.
they got I'm trying to remember the award that the ship had, but I wasn't aboard when they got it.
Oh,
I
okay.
managed to seem to avoid all the problems.
You were a very fortunate man.
Well, then when the war was over, since I had joined the regular Navy, I had another. Everybody was going home. I had 2 more years
Oh
to
dear.
serve. I finally ended up on an LST 542 in Little Creek, and we took that ship from Little Creek through the canal and into San Diego. Well, I was aboard her for the rest of my cruise, which was maybe a year and a half on this thing.
So you went from Iceland down to the warmth of San Diego, huh?
Right. And then from San Diego back through the canal, back to Guantanamo. And I had been around on the ships that I had been on. I'd been off North Carolina 8 times
Hmm.
on trips back and forth. And I can't think of the spot. It's embarrassing that.
All right.
Well, I have a problem with my vintage. Everything is I have to wait 2 minutes and 45 seconds before I can remember what it was I was going to say.
Okay. Well, then when you got home, when you were finally out of the Navy, you moved to Lexington.
Right.
Tell that good story about being a JP, and we'll wrap up with that.
I have um, I have many JP stories,
Well,
but
it must be lovely to be the justice of peace and marry people and so forth.
I've done over 400 weddings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a real hoot. The I can't think. Oh, I did one wedding in the Sheraton. Is that the one where the gal was one of the designers at Sir Richard's spot in Cava, where they have the King Richard's.
King Richard's Fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she was the set designer, so she wanted to be married in costume.
Oh,
She had her costume on, and the bridegroom was in the same arrangement, with curly feet and all that. They had the hangman in there. In the procession, the bridesmaid and best man each carried spears, which I was. And
where was this taking place? In the Sheraton?
the Sheraton, right?
Oh, wow. Spears walking into the Sheraton. Go ahead.
And that following, and then yours truly. So then we came into the final moment of the procession where I started my service, and they turned off all the lights, and I couldn't see what was going on at all, until they did break out a candle or two, dripping it into my book, But anyhow, off they went. And I think that was one of my stranger weddings. But
Yeah.
one time, oh, I guess, was it you that I was at the Hancock Church?
Yes, tell me that.
Oh,
Yes.
right. Where the couple were from New Hampshire. And I said, well, I can't marry you in New Hampshire, but, pick any place. And this uh, bride said, well, my daughter went to kindergarten at the Hancock Church there
Mhm.
in Lexington Center. So I said, well, we can perform there, but we'll have to stand on the porch, and I don't think they'll let us in. So on a Saturday morning at 9:30, we met on the porch, and they were tastefully dressed in their dungarees and tank tops. And as we started the ceremony, and I was just coming to the do yas, don't yas, when this pretty little girl drove up on her bicycle and said, where's the AA meeting? It's around to the back door, please. Right around the corner, dear. Keep going.
So you lucked out. You sailed the North Atlantic. And
Right. It was an uneventful, well, it was an eventful war for me, but as far as actual contact and combat with the enemy, like most of the folks in the service, I was very, very fortunate as far as real contact with the enemy was concerned. Right.
Right. Now, we've heard some very sad stories of people who've been there, and then stories like you where people have been all right. And
The luck
that's
of the draw. It was really the luck of the draw.
yeah. And you came out and with the justice of peace, which is interesting, having been a sailor way back in the Middle War. I thank you for sharing your story today.